The pale morning light filtered through the curtains of the small room at Riverwood General Hospital, casting a soft glow over 10-year-old Lily Anderson. Her breath came in shallow, labored gasps, and her skin had a translucent, almost ethereal quality. It wasn't the Lily her parents, Sarah and David, remembered. The once vibrant, mischievous girl with wild curls and boundless energy now lay still, pale, and fragile. Her battle with leukemia had drained every ounce of life from her, leaving only the echo of the vibrant girl she used to be. The doctors had tried everything. The chemotherapy, the countless blood tests, the rounds of medicine, all of it seemed like nothing more than a futile attempt to keep Lily alive a little longer. They had all but given up hope. The heart monitor that beeped beside her bed was irregular, its beep weakening by the minute. It felt as though it was measuring not only her heartbeats but the heartache of her parents, who sat quietly beside her bed. Sarah, her mother, held Lily's small hand in both of hers. Her palms were warm, a stark contrast to Lily's cold, limp fingers. Every breath Sarah took felt heavier, the weight of the situation settling deep into her chest. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but she refused to look away from her daughter. David sat across from her, his hands folded together, his gaze fixed on his daughter. His face, normally so strong and composed, now looked frail and broken, worn down by the months of struggle. Lily had always been a fighter. From the moment she was born, she had a fierce spirit that never seemed to break, no matter what life threw her way. But this illness, this disease, was different. It had no mercy. It had slowly stolen Lily's strength and vitality, and no matter how hard she fought, it seemed like the disease always found a way to take a little more from her. Despite the overwhelming odds, there was one constant in Lily's life. A presence that never wavered. A golden retriever named Max. Max had been by Lily's side since she was 4 years old. He was more than just a dog, he was her protector, her best friend, her confidant. When Lily had been diagnosed with leukemia, it had been Max who first seemed to sense something was wrong. From that day onward, he never left her side. When Lily was first admitted to the hospital, Max had tried to follow her into the ambulance, his body trembling with anxiety as the doors closed behind him. Sarah had to hold him back, whispering words of comfort that she knew would never fully calm him. Max would wait for his best friend to come home, she promised. But the dog's concerned eyes never left the ambulance as it drove away. The first time Lily had gone into remission, Max had been the one to celebrate with her. He had run circles around her, barking joyfully as she played in the backyard, laughing in a way she hadn't in months. When the relapse hit, it was Max who noticed first, his usual playful antics replaced by a solemn watchfulness. Lily could always count on him to be there when things felt too heavy. Now, as Lily lay unconscious in her hospital bed, Max's absence weighed heavily on Sarah's heart. She knew how much her daughter missed him. The bond they shared was something special, something beyond words. It was a bond that had been built over years of companionship, shared adventures, and quiet moments. Sarah turned to David, her voice shaky but resolute. "We should bring him. She needs him." David looked at her, his brow furrowing. "The doctors won't allow it, Sarah. You know that. It's not safe for him to be here." Sarah nodded, but the ache in her chest was unbearable. "She needs him," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe he can help her fight this, somehow. Maybe he can make her believe." David closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. He understood her need. He, too, could see how desperately their daughter missed the comfort of Max's presence. But even as he agreed, he knew there was little hope. The doctors had already told them there was nothing more they could do. The minutes dragged on in agonizing silence as Lily's heart monitor beeped slower and slower. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, her tears falling silently. Then, without warning, the door opened. A nurse stepped inside, her face thoughtful. "We've had a request," she said gently. "The hospital has made an exception. If you want, we can bring Max in." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. "You mean it? You'll bring him in?" The nurse nodded. "We'll get him for you. He'll be here in a few minutes." Sarah blinked back tears as she turned to David. "We can't wait. I know she needs him, and I'm not waiting any longer." Minutes later, the sound of Max's paws on the hospital floor filled the room. The door creaked open, and there he was, standing in the doorway, his fur slightly matted with age, but his eyes as warm and full of love as ever. The moment Max saw Lily, he rushed to her side. He immediately jumped up on the bed, lying beside her, his head resting gently on her hand. The change in the room was instant. For the first time in hours, there was a flicker of hope. Max's presence seemed to fill the air with something that couldn't be explained. Lily's breath, which had been shallow and erratic, became more steady. Her fingers moved slightly beneath Max's soft, comforting presence. Sarah leaned down, pressing her forehead to Lily's. She whispered, "He's here, sweetheart. Max is here. Everything's going to be okay." Max lay next to Lily, his eyes never leaving her face. It was as though he was telling her that she wasn't alone, that he would never leave her. No matter how weak her body became, Max was there to fight with her, to stay by her side. And so, the room filled with quiet but undeniable strength. As the morning sun peeked through the curtains, Lily's eyes fluttered open. They were filled with a quiet, peaceful light. And, for the first time in weeks, her heartbeat steadied. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically, a sign that something was shifting. It wasn't just the medicine that had changed things. It wasn't just the hospital equipment or the doctors. It was something deeper, something unspoken. It was Max's love that had brought her back from the edge. That bond, one that defied all understanding, had saved her. As Lily slowly sat up, she reached for Max, who leaned into her touch with a soft whine. Sarah and David exchanged looks of disbelief. Max had done it again. He had saved their daughter. And in that moment, they all understood, Max's love had no limits. As the days passed, Lily's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The doctors were astounded by her sudden improvement, which seemed to defy all medical logic. It wasn't the new treatments or medications that were working, it was something more, something invisible but powerful. Max, who had been a constant presence by her side, had not only provided comfort but a sense of purpose. The bond between them was more than just that of a girl and her dog, it was something deeper, something spiritual. Lily's heart, which had once struggled to maintain a steady rhythm, now beat with strength. The pallor that had gripped her body began to fade, and the energy that had once seemed lost in her small frame started to return. She still wasn't fully out of danger, but there was a noticeable shift. Max's presence was like a lifeline that reached beyond the physical realm, and for the first time in weeks, Lily smiled, a small, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. Her parents, Sarah and David, watched with growing amazement. They'd seen their daughter's life slip through their fingers, watched helplessly as her strength ebbed away. But now, as Lily slowly regained her vitality, they were filled with a new sense of hope, a hope they hadn't dared to feel in a long time. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the hospital room grew quiet, Lily's breathing deepened. She had been able to sit up for the first time in days, and she reached out to Max, who was lying by her side, his head resting on her lap. His eyes followed her every movement, his loyalty unwavering. "Thank you, Max," Lily whispered softly, her voice still weak, but full of emotion. She ran her fingers through his golden fur, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You saved me. I don't know how, but you did." Max's tail thumped once against the bed, and his ears perked up as though he understood. His gaze softened as he looked up at her, his own eyes shining with love. Max had always been there for Lily, through her first steps, her first day of school, and even the toughest days of her treatment. Now, he was here, silently sharing in her healing, offering the kind of comfort that only he could provide. Sarah, who had been standing by the window, wiped away a tear. She had been watching her daughter's strength return, but it wasn't just the medical advances that had made a difference, it was the love between Lily and Max that had sparked something within her. They had always known their daughter shared a special bond with her dog, but this was something extraordinary. "David," she whispered, not looking away from the scene. I think Max did something for her. Something we don't even fully understand." David stood behind her, his hands in his pockets, his thoughts heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. He looked at his daughter and the dog, so inseparable, so connected. "I don't know how, but I think you're right. There's something between them that goes beyond what we can explain." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with the soft sound of Max's breathing and the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath for a moment of clarity. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah sat by Lily's bed, holding her hand. David had gone to grab some coffee, and for the first time in a long while, it was just the two of them. Max, as usual, lay by Lily's side, his head resting against her feet. Lily's eyes were half closed, her breathing steady, but there was a sense of peace that had eluded them for so long. "Mom," Lily said, her voice soft but strong, "I feel better. I really do. It's like something changed. And Max, he was there, wasn't he? When I couldn't fight anymore, he was there." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she gently stroked her daughter's hair. "He was there, sweetheart. He always will be." For the next few days, Lily's condition continued to improve. Each morning, she woke with more strength, and each night, she went to bed with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. Max was always with her, never straying far from her side. He had become her anchor, grounding her when the weight of the illness threatened to pull her under. One morning, as the doctors conducted their rounds, they all seemed to share a look of bewilderment. The tests had shown significant improvement in Lily's condition, far beyond what they could have expected given her prognosis. Dr. Anderson, who had been Lily's primary doctor throughout the treatment, stood at the foot of her bed, reviewing the latest results. He glanced at Sarah and David before speaking. "I can't explain it," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of wonder and confusion. "Lily's vitals are improving at a rate that I would call remarkable, but, well, there's just no medical explanation for it. We're seeing results that we rarely see in cases like this. We'll need to keep monitoring her, but for now, I think we can cautiously say, she's improving." Sarah looked at David, her heart leaping with joy. David, too, looked surprised, but he knew, deep down, what had made the difference. It wasn't just the medicine, the treatments, or the doctor's care. It was Max. It had always been Max. The days that followed were filled with small, beautiful moments. Lily began to regain her appetite and strength. She started reading again, something she hadn't been able to do in months. She laughed with her parents, and she played with Max in the room. Max's tail wagged endlessly as he watched her, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like the world was opening up again. But as the days turned to weeks, and Lily's condition continued to stabilize, there was something else that changed. Max, once full of energy and life, began to seem different. He started to lie down more often, his movements slower than they had been before. His eyes were still as loving and full of devotion as ever, but there was a weariness in his expression that hadn't been there before. Sarah noticed the change first. One evening, after a long day of tests and doctor visits, she walked into Lily's room to find Max lying at the foot of the bed, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. "Max?" Sarah whispered, her heart tight with concern. Max opened his eyes slowly, lifting his head just enough to look at her. He gave a weak wag of his tail but didn't move. Sarah crouched beside him, gently petting his fur. "What's wrong, boy? Are you okay?" Max's eyes, though tired, looked at her with an understanding that made Sarah's heart ache. He had given everything he had for Lily. He had saved her life, there was no doubt in her mind about that. But now, as Lily's health improved, Max seemed to be slowly fading. Sarah stroked his head gently. "We're here, Max. We'll take care of you now. You've done your job. You've saved her." But Max didn't respond, his body growing weaker by the day. Sarah couldn't help but wonder, had Max truly sacrificed something of himself to help her daughter? And if so, how much longer could he hold on? That night, as the moon rose high in the sky, Sarah sat beside Lily's bed, holding Max's head in her lap. She whispered a promise to him, a promise that they would care for him, just as he had cared for Lily. But deep inside, she knew there was only so much time they had left with him. Max's love had been the lifeline that brought Lily back from the edge. Now, it seemed that he was giving everything for her. The only thing left to do was to ensure that the love Max had given them would never be forgotten. Lily, though recovering, was unaware of the changes that were slowly taking place in the dog she loved so dearly. But Sarah knew. Max had given everything to save their daughter, and now, it was their turn to return the favor. As the days passed, Max's condition continued to deteriorate. Lily's recovery, while miraculous, seemed to come at a silent cost to the golden retriever who had stood by her side through every moment of her struggle. Sarah watched helplessly as Max, once vibrant and full of energy, grew weaker with each passing day. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, there was a deep, undeniable weariness in his eyes, as if his soul was gradually withdrawing from the world, having given everything it could to save the child he loved. Lily, blissfully unaware of Max's decline, continued to improve. She sat up in bed on her own for the first time in weeks, smiling as she played with Max. The bond between them had always been strong, but now it felt even deeper, more profound. Max, though tired, still wagged his tail and nuzzled her affectionately, as if he was holding on to every last moment they had together. But Sarah knew that time was running out for the loyal dog who had sacrificed so much for her daughter. One evening, Sarah sat beside Max, gently brushing his fur as he lay at the foot of Lily's bed. His breathing was labored now, his once vibrant eyes dulled with exhaustion. The once golden coat that had gleamed so brightly now looked matted and dull. Max was losing his fight, and Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of his sacrifice. She had seen how much he had given, how much love he had poured into Lily, and now, it seemed that he was paying the price. Lily had fallen asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in months. Her health had been steadily improving, and her strength was slowly returning. But as Sarah watched Max, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of guilt. She knew that the dog had been a lifeline for her daughter, but how much longer could he hold on? "Max," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "You've done so much for her. You've brought her back. Now, it's our turn to take care of you." Max's ears flicked at her voice, and he lifted his head slightly, looking at her with tired eyes. He gave a small whimper, as though acknowledging her words, but he didn't move. It was clear to Sarah that Max had given everything he had, and there was nothing left to give. The next morning, as Lily woke and smiled at Max, Sarah's heart ached. Max had been by her side through every painful moment, every fear, and every uncertainty. But now, Max was the one who needed help. He had kept his promise to save Lily, but it seemed that in doing so, he had drained himself entirely. The veterinarian, Dr. Ellen, who had been keeping an eye on Max's condition, arrived at the hospital that afternoon. She had been a long-time family friend, and she had seen the bond between Lily and Max. When she entered the room, her face was full of concern. She had noticed the change in Max the last time she visited, and now, seeing him again, she could tell that something wasn't right. Sarah met Dr. Ellen by the door, her voice shaky. "He's not getting any better, Ellen. I think he's dying." Dr. Ellen nodded grimly. "I've been monitoring him, and I've seen the signs. He's exhausted, physically and emotionally. It's like his body is shutting down. The stress, the love, the bond, everything he's given, it's all caught up with him." "But how?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. "How can he just give up everything like that? He saved Lily. He brought her back." "I don't know," Dr. Ellen said softly. "But sometimes, animals give so much of themselves for the ones they love that it takes a toll on them. Max was the one holding Lily together. He was her anchor. And now, it's his time to rest." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she turned to look at Max, who lay quietly at Lily's feet, his eyes half closed. He had always been so full of life, so full of energy. But now, there was nothing left but a tired, loyal heart. Lily, unaware of the gravity of the situation, looked at Max and smiled. "He's tired, isn't he, Mom?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. "He saved me, didn't he?" Sarah nodded, her heart breaking. "Yes, sweetheart. He saved you. And now it's our turn to take care of him." Later that afternoon, Sarah and David made the difficult decision to take Max to the local vet's office for a final checkup. They had seen the signs, and they knew it was time. Max had given everything for Lily, and now he needed to be free from the exhaustion that had claimed him. As they drove to the clinic, Max lay quietly in the back seat, his head resting on Lily's lap. She gently stroked his fur, whispering soft words of comfort. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew something was wrong. Max had been so strong for so long, but now he seemed so fragile, so fragile. When they arrived at the clinic, the vet, Dr. Thompson, immediately noticed the change in Max. He had seen the dog before, and he knew that Max had been holding on for Lily. But now, he could see that Max was ready to let go. Dr. Thompson examined him carefully, checking his vitals and performing a series of tests. After a long, quiet examination, he turned to Sarah and David. "I'm sorry," Dr. Thompson said gently. "Max has given everything he could. His body is shutting down, and I don't think there's anything more we can do. It's time for him to rest." Sarah's heart shattered as she looked at Max, his eyes now dull and tired. He had done so much for them, and now, it seemed that his journey was coming to an end. Lily, who had been silently holding Max's paw, looked up at her parents. "Can we let him rest, Mom? He did everything he could for me. Now it's time for him to rest, right?" Sarah nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. You're right. He's given us everything." As the decision was made to let Max go, Sarah and David stayed by his side, stroking his fur and whispering words of love. Max lay peacefully, his body finally at rest, knowing that he had fulfilled his purpose. He had saved the life of the girl he loved, and now it was time for him to rest. The room was silent, save for the soft sound of Lily's breathing and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. The bond between them, between the girl and her dog, had transcended everything. And though Max was gone, his love would never leave them. It would live on in their hearts, in every moment of joy and gratitude, and in the memory of the dog who had given everything for the one he loved. Days passed since Max had peacefully crossed the Rainbow Bridge, leaving a void in the family that no one could fill. The house felt empty without his gentle presence, his tail wagging at the door as he awaited the return of his beloved Lily. His absence was a heavy silence, one that both Sarah and David could feel in the air. They had known he was their protector, but it was only in his absence that they realized just how much he had held them together. Lily, though heartbroken, found solace in the quiet strength that Max had left behind. She spent hours sitting near the window, her small fingers tracing the outline of Max's collar, now resting gently in her hands. Her room, once filled with sounds of play and laughter shared with her best friend, now felt still. But each time she closed her eyes, she could still feel Max beside her, his warm presence enveloping her like a comforting embrace. Sarah and David knew they had to continue their lives without Max, but neither of them could let go of the lesson he had taught them, the power of unconditional love. Max had given everything for Lily without hesitation, and now, it was their turn to honor that love. They decided to focus on keeping Max's spirit alive by helping others, just as he had helped their family through the darkest days. One morning, after weeks of mourning, Sarah suggested, "What if we help animals the way Max helped Lily? We can start with the shelter." David looked at her, his face softening with the thought of their loyal friend. He nodded, his resolve firm. "I think Max would have wanted that." They began visiting the local animal shelter every weekend, spending time with abandoned dogs and giving them the attention and care they so desperately needed. With every visit, Sarah and David felt that their grief was slowly being replaced with a sense of purpose. They had been so consumed by their pain, but now, they were able to give something back. They were healing, just as Lily had healed, and it was through helping these animals that they found a way to continue Max's legacy. Lily, too, became involved. Though her heart was still heavy, she poured her energy into caring for the dogs. She spent time talking to them, brushing their fur, and playing with them. She shared Max's story with anyone who would listen, explaining how his love had saved her. It was as if she had taken his courage, his devotion, and was passing it on to these animals in need. One day, while at the shelter, Lily came across a small dog, no bigger than a puppy, with deep brown eyes that seemed to be asking for help. The dog was thin and covered in scars, a stark reminder of the hard life it had lived. It was a picture of what Max had once been, lost and scared, before he had found his way into their hearts. Lily knelt beside the dog, extending her hand. It sniffed her cautiously, its tail wagging slowly. "You look just like Max," Lily whispered softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "But you don't have to be alone anymore." That day, they decided to adopt the dog, naming him Buddy. He wasn't a replacement for Max, no one could replace him, but in some ways, Buddy became a bridge to healing. Buddy's love was like a fresh start, reminding them that while they had lost so much, there was still so much more to give. As the years passed, Buddy became a cherished part of their family, and the shelter visits continued. They worked to raise awareness about the importance of adopting shelter animals, spreading the love and hope that Max had instilled in them. It became their mission, and with every animal they helped, they knew they were honoring the memory of the dog who had saved Lily's life. Lily often sat by the window in the evenings, just as she had done when Max was still with them. Buddy would sit at her feet, his warm presence a gentle reminder that love, in all its forms, never truly fades. She would look up at the sky and whisper, "Thank you, Max. I will never forget what you did for me. You'll always be my hero." And so, in the lives they touched, through the animals they saved, Max's spirit lived on. He had shown them the true meaning of love, a love so powerful that it could heal, protect, and transform lives. He had given everything for the one he loved most, and in doing so, he left a legacy that would continue for generations to come. Max may have been gone, but the love he had given them would live forever, an enduring force that inspired kindness, compassion, and a deep understanding that even the smallest act of love can change the world. The family knew now that their journey wasn't about saying goodbye, but about carrying forward the love Max had shown them, a love that would remain a part of them, and would continue to guide them, no matter where life took them. And with Buddy by their side, they would keep honoring Max's memory, living out his legacy of love and sacrifice every single day.